This video is brought to you by Squarespace, the all-in-one website platform for entrepreneurs to stand out and succeed online. Last year, I went bananas. Every Monday of 2024, I watched a monkey movie, a movie with an ape or monkey in it. I was asked more times than I can count why I was doing this challenge, what the greater meaning was, what this was all leading to. And the answer is, I don't know. I don't know why I did this, and I'm going to try and figure it out somewhere in this video. The challenge did not catch on. I did not start a movement the way I thought I would. I didn't learn all that much, but I did it. And I kind of feel like I have to make a video about it, right? Because what was it all for if I don't? So here we are. This is going to be a proper ranked list of all the monkey movies I watched in 2024. Going from best to worst, starting at the top and heading deeper into the dark depths of Monkey Mondays, where we'll be talking about some movies that no one should ever watch again. The best monkey movie I watched in 2024 was Cure, directed by Kiyoshi Kurosawa, which is a shame considering how the monkey appears in the film. The film follows a detective who is investigating a series of identical murders. This is the best I've seen a psychological thriller and police procedural coexist under the same film. It's a masterful descent into madness. By the end, you feel like you are the detective. It is a very disturbing film, and the most disturbing scene happens to be the one with the monkey. Princess Mononoke, directed by Hayao Miyazaki, was a close second. I recently got copyright striked by Studio Ghibli. Thank you so much. So I will not be showing any footage from this film. This film is about a young boy named Ashitaka who tries to restore balance between nature and man. It's my favorite Studio Ghibli film, if you didn't know. It's one of the best examples of who Miyazaki is as a filmmaker. Jaw-dropping animation from front to back, incredible sound design, an incredible score, and there's even a tiny scene with monkeys in it. I mean, there's literally, it says Mono in the title. Come on. Nope, directed by Jordan Peele, tells the story of a brother and sister who suspect that a UFO is above their ranch. Again, a very disturbing use of a chimp in this film. I would argue kind of a pivotal scene, the most important scene of the film. There are so many different ways of interpreting the monkey specifically. That's what makes it so good. I've talked about it a million times at this point, so I think we get the point. I'll just leave it there for now. Over the Garden Wall, directed by Nate Cash, tells the story of two boys who go lost in the woods. There are two monkey scenes in this show, one of which is the gorilla suit, the other is the dream sequence. I've seen this show many times. I don't know what to say about it at this point other than it's just a good, wholesome time. I did not realize there was a monkey in it. I did not watch this on a Monday, but I have to talk about it anyway. But I loved it. It's the first wholesome example of a monkey that we've seen on this list so far. The Wizard of Oz, directed by Victor Fleming, tells the story of, it's The Wizard of Oz. I watched this because I consider it one of the more iconic monkey films, and they're real monkeys, not CGI. But almost immediately, I was reminded that it's more than that. It's just one of the most beautiful looking films, period. It's kind of upsetting to think about how it's all been downhill from here. I mean, you look at this next to Wicked, and it's like, what happened? Where did we go wrong? It's a lovely film. If I ever have a child, it will be one of the first films I show them. Days of Heaven, directed by Terrence Malick, tells the story of a man who flees Chicago with his little sister and girlfriend. To be honest, I don't remember where the monkey is in this movie. I didn't watch this on a Monday, but my girlfriend tagged it as Monkey Mondays, so I have to I gotta include it. That aside, this is probably my favorite Terrence Malick flick. Now that some time has passed, I think I can confidently say that. He really puts me somewhere else with this thing. It's like the power of film on full display. I feel like I'm leaving my body while watching this. It's a stunning example of transcendental cinema, some of the best cinematography of all time. Just incredible. Citizen Kane, directed by Orson Welles, tells the rise and fall of a major publishing tycoon. I watched this one both for Monkey Mondays as well as my President's video. It was Donald Trump's favorite film. And even if it's one of the briefest inclusions of a monkey on this list, literally being a 2-second shot at the top of the film, it's still monkey cinema. This is one of the first films they showed us in film school, and as high as my expectations were, it somehow surpassed them. It's just as thought-provoking and entertaining as I was hoping it would be. It surprised me in a number of ways. Still holds up incredibly well on a rewatch. Citizen Kane. The Fly, directed by David Cronenberg, is about a scientist who finds himself in a tricky situation after a fly ends up in his teleportation device. I don't know why this didn't click for me initially, but on a rewatch, I realized this just might be my favorite Cronenberg film, which is not the craziest take in the world, but hard to deny how good this thing is. Still holds up as one of the grossest body horror films I've seen. I mean, for him specifically, I think this is one of his most impressive, but it's so much more than that too. That's what sets it apart from a lot of body horror that I've seen. It's an incredibly romantic and deeply tragic film by the end. The first of many Planet of the Apes films, The Planet of the Apes, directed by Franklin J. Schaffner, tells the story of 3 astronauts who land on a planet where apes rule and humans are slaves. Widely regarded as one of the best science fiction films ever made, I can see why. It is a pretty thorough examination of this world, the politics of it, and why it is the way it is. Doesn't give you much of an action fix, I will say. Anybody that's looking for that going into it is probably going to be disappointed, but in exchange, you do get some pretty thoughtful social commentary that still is fascinating today. This movie, specifically one scene in particular, has really stuck with me. Holy Motors, directed by Leos Carax, is about a man who drives around Paris performing different roles throughout the day. It's a very bizarre, very French film, but I really loved it. This is not one I expected to end up on this list, but there's a monkey that comes out of nowhere, but by that point, I'm not surprised at all that there's a monkey in this film. It's such a weird film that, yeah, literally there's no decision that could surprise me, but it still managed to do so with the very final scene. Months later, I can't tell you if I love it or hate it. It just continues to bounce around my brain. I can't figure this one out, which sums up how I feel about everything Leos Carax has put into this world. It's really unique stuff. He is a true artist in every sense of the word, and Holy Motors is a prime example of why. Inland Empire, directed by David Lynch, is about an aspiring actress who joins a film that happens to be a remake of an unfinished film where the stars were murdered. It's got everything you love about David Lynch. Nightmarish sequences, top-tier surrealism, an incredible heart-wrenching lead performance from Laura Dern, some really good humor every now and then. It's a tough one. Definitely the type of thing you need to be in the right headspace for. If I do not recommend starting your David Lynch journey with this film, but when you completely submit yourself to this thing, you realize it really is one of his most impressive films, a true cinematic achievement. Takes you to some pretty dark places, and forever grateful for this film and for David Lynch. While we're at it, What Did Jack Do, directed by David Lynch, tells the story of a detective interrogating a monkey about a murder. In typical Lynch fashion, this is very silly and very weird. He understood how to use a monkey in a film perfectly. Just watch this and you'll know why. This is the second time I've seen this, and I still couldn't tell you what exactly it's about. I don't really want to know what it's about. It is about as coherent as a dream, which I think is kind of the point of Lynch's work. Baraka, directed by Ron Frick, is an experimental documentary attempting to capture life on our planet. The iconic snow monkey shot from that one Aphex Twin video is from this film, which is fun. And I really didn't expect this to be one of the best things I watched this year, period. I love the editing in this thing. The cut is so smooth, and it has a weird rhythm to it that you just totally get wrapped up in. It guides you seamlessly through so many different walks of life. So many big themes like industry, religion, and man's relationship to nature are told beautifully without any words, just footage and music. It's really stunning. Babe 2, Pig in the City, directed by George Miller, is the sequel to Babe and follows Babe the pig when he makes his way to the city. This film is chock full of animals, so obviously there's going to be a monkey in it, and George Miller knows how to use that monkey perfectly. And it's some of the most fun I've had with a film all year. It's kind of George Miller's Poor Things when you think about it. Very strange, very ambitious, nothing like it. Speed Racer, directed by the Wachowski sisters, is about a young racer who goes up against a corrupt executive competing in the same race that killed his brother. It is, to this day, one of the most visually stunning things I've ever seen. It uses CGI so recklessly, but as a result, you get a one-of-a-kind spectacle that not only is unique to the art form, but also probably the last of its kind. It is a bit headache-inducing, to be honest, and it is a tad long, but damn, we're never going to get something like this again, so I guess you should just soak up as much of this as you possibly can. The Tale of the Fox, directed by the Stairwitz siblings, is a stop-motion animated film from 1937 that took 18 whole months to finish, and you see the effort in the film. It's like Mad God from a few years ago, where it's like, you can just see the passion oozing out of the screen. It's about a mischievous fox who is ordered by the king to be arrested. A stop-motion film about a fox who happens to be a menace? Are you kidding me? Obviously, I was a big fan of this, but it did genuinely surprise me at how well animated it was. They're using tricks in this that animators today still don't use. Like, it is somehow still ahead of its time. It's one of the biggest hidden gems on this list. If you're at all interested in animation, specifically stop motion, this is required viewing, I have to say. It's also available on YouTube. Gladiator, directed by Ridley Scott, is about a powerful general who has to become a gladiator. I did not watch this on a Monday, but it does have a monkey in it, and I really liked this. A lot more than I thought I would, actually. It's a strong example of how Ridley Scott uses scale with some great battles, great performances, and a gut punch ending. Aguirre, the Wrath of God, directed by Werner Herzog, is about a Spanish expedition down the Amazon River. It was surprisingly my very first Werner Herzog film, and was even more beautiful and harrowing than I expected expected it to be. It's such a delicately paced descent into madness, very spiritual filmmaking, made even more impactful by the fact that the crew themselves were fighting the same conditions while filming. This also might be the most monkeys I've seen on screen at once, which is just a really strange monkey scene in this. It's both kind of funny, it's very surprising, but also really unsettling. There's a real weird energy about that final scene that I can't stop thinking about. King Kong, directed by John Guillermin, is the 1970s remake of the classic King Kong film. It's about a film crew who find a giant monkey, and you know what happens. And this is such an underrated film, in my opinion. Not enough people give it the credit it deserves. What I realized through this challenge is that to make a good creature flick, a good King Kong flick, you need to make the humans in the story interesting. So many of these stories, specifically the King Kong films, underwrite their human characters, and those scenes are always such a chore to get through. They feel like homework, but this film gets it right. You have Charles Grodin, Jeff Bridges, and obviously Jessica Lange, who are all such a blast to watch. I had no complaints whenever it was a non-King Kong scene. They have so much chemistry, they complement each other perfectly. It makes it a damn good time. Shockingly, I think it's my favorite version of this specific King Kong story, which is crazy to say. Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, directed by Matt Reeves, is the second film in the new series of Apes films, and it follows Caesar and his followers as they navigate a world where only a few humans remain. It's a pretty stark tonal shift from Rise, which was mostly a fun sci-fi adventure film. I also technically watched that one in December 2023, so it's not on this list, which is kind of annoying. This, on the other hand, reads like a gritty post-apocalyptic drama, a much more serious Apes film. And usually I go for a more fun route, but in this case, I really loved this approach. It's probably the strongest of this new batch of films. You get a lot of fascinating world building, some really great action scenes, some really heart-wrenching moments. This is when Caesar really becomes a full-on character. You also get this shot, which is like, come on. An American Werewolf in London, directed by John Landis, is about two college students who encounter a werewolf and what happens when one of them survives the encounter and lives in fear that he'll turn into, well, a werewolf. This has been on my watch list for a very long time, and it's just as fun and as crazy as I was hoping it would be. Griffin Dunn is great as always. The makeup is pretty disgusting in a great way. Just a total blast. Monkey Man, directed by Dev Patel, is about a man who sets out to seek revenge against the corrupt leaders who killed his mother. Even if this thing is a little rough around the edges, I consider this one of the most exciting directorial debuts I've seen in the last few years, specifically by an actor. I mean, they're doing things with the camera that are borderline dangerous, but incredibly exciting to watch. And Patel clearly has a lot to say. This is a very personal film, on top of being a great action film. Very unique and very impressive, even if it doesn't come out as cleanly as you might want it to. King Kong, directed by Peter Jackson, is Jackson's follow-up to his epic Lord of the Rings trilogy. An anecdote I feel like I have to bring up because it explains why this thing comes off so indulgent, sometimes in a good way, other times in a bad way. This was my final Monkey Mondays film, which felt right. It's sometimes stupid, it's sometimes moving, it uses the technology of its time to its fullest potential, and it's kind of pointless, which is how this entire challenge felt. Hors de l'eau, directed by a bunch of people, is about the social hierarchy within a group of snow monkeys. It's a half live action, half animated short that uses that style in a really cool way. It also happens to be devastating. In just 11 minutes, I ended up getting really sad. I don't usually think about short films that often after watching them, but this one has stuck with me for a while, which is probably what makes it the best short film I watched in this challenge. The Monkey Sword Masamune, directed by Yasuji Murata, is about a man who travels to deliver a letter and what happens when he's gifted a sword by a monkey. I really love these older Japanese animations. The art style is just really pleasing to the eye. It still looks really amazing. Pretty damn good story too. That's all I gotta say about this one. The Circus, directed by Charlie Chaplin, is about a tramp who joins the circus as a handyman and eventually joins the show. As I've come to expect with most Chaplin films, what starts as a silly and fun slapstick turned into a very heartfelt film about falling in love and getting that heart broken. On top of it, it is one of the most personal films I've seen from Chaplin. It comments on what it means to perform for people and where he finds emotional fulfillment in that career. Bobo the Monkey, directed by Victoria Vincent, is a tiny animated short about a monkey escaping the zoo. I really loved the animation in this. Very simple, but does a lot with its style. I do wish it was longer. Max My Love, directed by legendary filmmaker Nagisa Oshima. Oh boy, was I excited to talk about this one. Is about a woman who has an affair with a chimpanzee. The film is listed as a comedy, but it's not that funny. This is a pretty disturbing movie. The chimpanzee freaks me the fuck out. It's a really terrifying costume, and the way they light this film so brightly gives it this really just raw and nauseating look. Charlotte Rampling is very good in this, I have to say. She plays the part very earnestly. It's really not the best thing in the world. It's like a diet version of Buñuel in its critique on the bourgeoisie, but it's still pretty damn fun. Megalopolis, directed by Francis Ford Coppola, is about, man, who knows? But they say it's about a genius who is trying to build a utopia. Once again, not a film I watched on a Monday, but it does have a monkey in it. Again, not one of those where I remember where the monkey is. I like this film a lot more than most people, clearly. I respect its ambition, even when it doesn't land. And I think we should hear Coppola out and embrace bold cinematic swings like this instead of dismissing them. Project Nim, directed by James Marsh, is a documentary about a baby chimp who is raised by a group of scientists as though it were a human baby for science. This film is fascinating, and it gets more fascinating the longer it goes on. The longer it goes on, it also happens to get more horrifying and heartbreaking. It is a bit infuriating to watch. The complete incompetence of the scientists is just so ridiculous. But the sheer amount of footage they had for this is pretty impressive, and they do a lot with it in the edit. It's a pretty impressive doc. Yellow Submarine, directed by George Dunning, is an animated jukebox fantasy musical inspired by the music of the Beatles. The plot is too absurd and too complicated to sum up, so I'm just gonna... you get the idea. But that's part of the appeal of this, right? Is just letting go and letting the animation wash over you. I love the animation style of this. It's not the most coherent watch, but damn is it breathtaking. I also don't think the point is to understand what's happening here. People talk about Fantastic Planet in the same way all the time, and I feel like Yellow Submarine should just be given the same amount of respect. For the same reason. 12 Monkeys, directed by Terry Gilliam, is about an imprisoned man who is sent back in time to gather information that will prevent a plague from happening. Like any time travel film, this gets pretty convoluted pretty quickly. I love the concept, and Gilliam never fails to go 110% on the production design, but I found the wackiness of this to get pretty tiresome pretty quickly. Not really my cup of tea, personally. The 12 Monkeys aren't monkeys. There are still monkeys in this, but I was pretty surprised by that. Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, directed by Wes Ball, is the latest installment in this new trilogy of apes, this post-Caesar trilogy, they're calling it. And I was a little hesitant going into this. I didn't know how well this would work without Caesar. He's kind of the heart and soul of those films. But it gets there. It's some really beautiful world building and impressive VFX. They establish the world pretty cleanly. As good as the world building is, it does get a bit sleepy at times. It kind of relies a lot on the VFX and the immersion of it. I hope they get to keep making these, as I do really respect them, even if it's a bit forgettable. Every Which Way But Loose, directed by James Fargan, follows Clint Eastwood and his orangutan friend Clyde as they set out on a journey to rescue his new girlfriend after she disappears. This is a fun and goofy time, if you can't tell. Not nearly as good as I wanted it to be, considering what it pitches itself as. Kind of a one-trick pony, if you know what I mean. It gets old after a little bit. But seeing as though it literally delivers in being Clint hanging out with an orangutan, I couldn't be too disappointed. I don't know how I was expecting anything more sophisticated than what I got here. Runaway Brain, directed by Chris Bailey, is an animated Disney short that follows Mickey Mouse as he earns funds for Minnie's anniversary present by becoming an assistant to a mad scientist. What the fuck am I doing with this challenge? It turns into a great little horror watch that surprised me in how much it leaned into the creepiness. Is Disney. Kung Fu Panda 2, directed by Jennifer Yuh Nelson, follows Dragon Warrior Po and his gang as they fight off a new villain who plans to wipe out all of China. This is a severe downgrade from the first Kung Fu Panda, in my opinion, which is one of my favorite DreamWorks films. The animation here is certainly a step up, I have to say, and it's certainly watchable, but a lot of the humor and personality and quirkiness that you saw in the first one just doesn't carry over into this all that well. The Mighty Peking Man, directed by Ho Meng Hua, is a monster film loosely based on King Kong. It's about an explorer who discovers a peaceful monster named Utan and his human companion Samantha, and what happens when they try to bring the monster back to Hong Kong. This film is extremely campy and silly. It's also very stupid and at times extremely misogynistic, but for what it is, considering what else I watched this year, it's really not the worst thing in the world, specifically that opening scene, which is definitely worth watching. A Day at the Zoo, directed by Tex Avery, is a cute little animated short that's essentially just a bunch of puns and dad jokes, which was enough for me. I had a good time with this, especially considering I was not in the mood that day, but this cheered me up. The animation looks nice. It tickled me. I get a kick out of these jokes. Not upset that I watched this, to be honest. Gladiator 2, directed by Ridley Scott, is the follow-up to his first Gladiator film. It's obviously not as good as the first one, if you can't tell by this placement. A Day at the Zoo beat it, but it's still quite fun. Denzel Washington is doing a great job. He's picking up Paul Mescal's slack. The CGI monkeys in this are, in fact, very disturbing, but very cool to look at. War for the Planet of the Apes, directed by Matt Reeves, is the final film in this trilogy, and it follows Caesar and his following of apes as they are forced to take on an army of humans led by Woody Harrelson. For being the final film in the trilogy, it's a bit anticlimactic, especially for a film titled War. I mean, the VFX are the best they've ever been, don't get me wrong. The action can be really good, but the film just doesn't live up to the potential, in my opinion. It's very contained to this one prison area. That said, the final note that this film leaves you on is probably the most moved I've been by anything in the Apes films. Wicked, directed by John M. Chu, is about the origins of Galinda the Good Witch and Elphaba, the Wicked Witch of the West. And I wish I liked this a bit more. I wish I was fun, but I'm just not. Everyone else seems to be seeing something magical about this that I just can't get into. Might have something to do with the incredibly bland direction and color grade on this. That said, Ariana Grande and Cynthia Erivo are both really good. I love how this thing sounds. But other than that, I'm surprised at how much praise this has gotten, to be honest. Night at the Museum, directed by Sean Levy, is about a new museum night guard who discovers everything in the Natural History Museum comes alive at night. This is a childhood favorite of mine that still holds up incredibly well. It's a good time. It's some really good family filmmaking fun. Crystal the Monkey delivers one of her best performances. There's also a really touching Robin Williams performance in this too. But yeah, that's it. The Story of the Monkey King, directed by Nobuo Ofuji, is an animated short that follows the Monkey King as he embarks on a journey to find a sacred text. It was, frankly, my introduction to this era of Japanese animation, and I thought it was lovely. Really nice to look at, pretty charming. That's about it. The Jungle Book, directed by Wolfgang Reitherman, is a classic Disney animated film about a boy and a bear living in the jungle. The music in this thing is so damn good. It completely overshadowed the fact that this is one of the weakest films to come out of this era of Disney. I mean, it's not offensively bad, but you see the placement on this list. I love the characters and I love the animation. Obviously love the music. This is definitely meant for children. And it's not a bad film for children, but even if I was a child, I would be pretty damn bored by this. Kong Skull Island, directed by Jordan Roberts, is a new King Kong film that follows a group of scientists, soldiers, and adventurers when they end up on Skull Island and need to find their way out. I will say, despite its placement on this list, this is a pretty interesting take on the King Kong films. It's pretty stripped back plot-wise and focuses almost entirely on island stuff, which I kind of appreciate. It gives the filmmakers a chance to play around in this world a bit more, have a little bit more fun with dinosaurs and shit. And it's good, fine, fun. I liked it way more than I thought I would. But because of the simplistic approach, I can't say it's the most memorable thing in the world. Coco, a Talking Gorilla, directed by Barbet Schroeder, is a documentary about Coco, a talking gorilla, who is able to communicate her feelings through American Sign Language. An undeniably fascinating subject. It's hard not to get into this thing, but at the same time, it didn't really surprise me in any particular way. It didn't pull me all that hard. A bit cut and dry for my taste, but still worth watching if you're doing a Monkey Mondays challenge. Escape from the Planet of the Apes, directed by Don Taylor, is the third follow-up to the original Planet of the Apes. This time, they switch it up a bit. The apes land on a human planet, which opens up a ton of fun. It gets pretty silly. Usually these films are a bit humorless, I have to say, despite the subject matter. And the seriousness is part of the appeal, don't get me wrong. But it is nice to see some silliness. It's not nearly as, thought-provoking as the original. It's definitely not even close to being as good, but it's alright. It's alright. The Musician Monkey, directed by Emile Reynaud, which is playing on screen right this moment, is the shortest and oldest movie I watched in this challenge. My favorite thing to do is play this when people least expect it so that Letterboxd purists feel like they need to log it. Like, look, you're watching it, you gotta go log it now. And it's pretty cool. Monkey movies have been around for a while. That's awesome. The Chimp, directed by James Parrott, is a Stan and Ollie short film where they play circus performers who drive the circus to ruin and end up with a chimp. I don't remember this film at all, I have to be completely honest with you. I just now had to refresh my memory on what this was. But I do remember it putting a big smile on my face. I mean, look at the chimp. How could you not smile at this? Assuming there wasn't any animal cruelty, which I suspect there was, it's a pretty harmless and good time. Nanette, directed by Nicolas Philibert. These names are so... is an experimental documentary about an orangutan in a zoo comprised entirely of footage of the ape as zoogoers converse in the background. It really makes you think about going to the zoo. It makes you feel like you're at the zoo, forced to observe a singular area for over an hour and listen to the people around you. It's pretty thought-provoking in that way. But unfortunately, this does start to feel just a tad tedious after a while, despite being only 70 minutes. I honestly think if I had watched this in like a dark theater, I would have gotten a bit more out of it. Monkey Kingdom, directed by Mark Linfield and Alistair Fothergill, is a Disney documentary about a bunch of monkeys. This is, I kid you not, the film that broke me. I watched this probably halfway through this challenge, and it made me realize just how big of a waste this whole thing is. I don't remember anything that happened in this film. It's basically a movie meant for like 4th graders. You're supposed to watch this in a classroom. I'm an adult man. The Doctor and the Monkey, directed by George Méliès, is a silent short film that I also don't remember all too well. But from what I can remember, it's some solid slapstick. Nothing exceptional, nothing terrible, a good time. Mr. Go, directed by Kim Yong-hwa, is about a silverback gorilla who somehow ends up playing professional baseball. This thing is well over 2 hours long. A detail I always have to bring up because it's baffling to me. If this were a tight 90 minutes only focused on the gorilla playing baseball, not the politics around it or the backstory, I think this would be one of the finest pieces of cinema. But that is not what this is. Instead, this is an overlong, really stupid movie. Gorilla X Kong, The New Empire, directed by Adam Wingard, is about, well, Godzilla and Kong joining forces to do God knows what. I had some fun with this in the theater, I have to admit, but it is one of the dumbest it's one of the dumbest movies I've ever seen. This is a clear example of why you need interesting characters for these films to work. There's a lot of non-Godzilla, non-King Kong scenes in this that are just it's just a waste of time. The 20 minutes where it is just apes, though, is like damn near peak. An entire film of that we'd be talking about at the Oscars, and I mean that genuinely. Trog, directed by Freddie Francis. What are these names? Follows a creature named Trog, who is sort of a monkey, but it's a stretch. This is most notably Joan Crawford's final feature film role. It's good, campy fun, nothing offensively bad, but a lot of this is people talking in rooms, which, you know, I'm starting to sound like I have the attention span of a 12-year-old here, but when it's bad, it's really bad. Especially when Trog is so much fun to watch. What do these filmmakers don't get about we're here for one thing and one thing only? Dunstan Checks In is directed by Ken Kwapis. Follows a hotel concierge who needs to keep everything under control for the day. And what happens when Dunstan, an orangutan, checks in? This thing has the plot of like an episode of Sweet Life of Zack and Cody, which is not entirely a bad thing. It's a ton of fun. I did not grow up on this, but I would have probably gotten a kick out of it as a kid. Some really solid slapstick here and there, but it's not, you know, the cleanest, most serious film. I couldn't put it any higher than this. The Legend of Tarzan, directed by David Yates, is a live-action remake of the classic animated film Tarzan. And man, talk about a piece of shit. This one encapsulates everything wrong with these live-action remakes. It's so forgettable, it doesn't even get brought up when people talk about live-action remakes. Like, you know, there's the easy targets like The Lion King, but no one talks about Legend of Tarzan because they don't even remember it happened. Dull cinematography, a general feeling of pointlessness, lack of whimsy. Not even Alexander Skarsgård can breathe any life into this thing. Let's do better, right? I'm glad we've moved on from this. Beneath the Planet of the Apes, directed by Ted Post, is the first follow-up to the classic 1968 Planet of the Apes. This follows in the first in both good and bad ways. The good is that the final act of this goes to some really crazy places that are way more out there than the first one, which is saying a lot. I had to respect the ending of this, even if it's not as good as the first. The bad is that every other aspect is like a carbon copy of what worked in the first film. It just doesn't work. It's kind of a bore. It's like you know exactly where things are going. You feel like you're having deja vu because everything is like the exact same. They casted an actor who looks identical to what's his face. It is slightly less thought-provoking. In fact, it's not very thought-provoking at all, and it's kind of a bore. Son of Kong, directed by Ernest B. Schroedsack. Are you serious? No, Schroedsack. That's not that much better. Is the first follow-up to the classic 1933 King Kong, made in less than a year. Talk about striking while the iron is hot. Boy, does that rushness come through in the filmmaking. This thing is so slapped together and so poorly executed. It's hard to take anything happening here seriously. If you think Hollywood is sad these days, like, They've been doing this shit for a while. The stop motion of the creatures is pretty good. It will never not be good. I love the way the stop motion creatures look. I just wish they were attached to a better film with a little bit more purpose than whatever this is. Half Human, directed by Ishiro Honda, follows 3 parties who are trying to find a snow creature. This film was banned from Japan for its poor depiction of the country's Ainu population. And that aside, the film is also just kind of a snooze fest. It's not even banned in a cool way. I think Ishiro Honda adds something culturally significant to his creature films, even the dumbest of them, that makes them feel like a step above what you're used to from this subgenre. But this one is kind of a flop, I have to be honest. This one is not worth your time. Planet of the Apes, directed by Tim Burton, is a remake of the 1960s Planet of the Apes. It's the worst Apes film I watched this year. Very dull, very pointless. Feels like a generic action film. None of the quirks are there. There's nothing to chew on. Paul Giamatti's innocent, and I do like the makeup. That stuff was really great. But this was disappointing both as an Apes film and as a Tim Burton film. It's like, it doesn't really sound like anyone besides Paul Giamatti wanted to be here. And the worst monkey movie I watched this year, easily the worst movie I watched, period, is Queen Kong, directed by Frank Agrama. Holy hell, this is terrible. This is a terrible, terrible movie. This is a gender swap King Kong parody, if you couldn't tell. That checks off just about every box of wrongs in the book. Incredibly sexist, sometimes racist, looks like shit, has a sense of humor I frankly can't even comprehend. I can't even call it not my thing, because it's like, whose thing is this? Not fun at all, not entertaining. Literally, there's no appeal to this thing. It's a tremendous waste of time and money that nobody should have to sit through again. I regret sitting through this. I could have done so many other things with my time in the time it took me to watch this. It almost makes me think less of King Kong in general because it's responsible for this existing in the first place. So just fuck this movie. And there we go. Over 50 monkey movies in a year. How about that one, folks? Do we like that? Do we like this? What did we learn in a year of watching monkey films? I think what I learned is that if movie watching is a hobby you're serious about, that you want to, dive into deeper, giving yourself a challenge like this can take you to some really interesting places. I think turning movie watching into a challenge is often looked down upon. It's not the purest form of engaging with art, I have to admit, but I would argue the pros of it simply outweigh the cons. Every time I do a movie watching challenge, this one being the biggest one I've ever done, I really do discover a lot of gems. But that's what I will say. If you're going to do a challenge, do it for something more fulfilling than Monkey Mondays. Do not do this challenge. Watch a film from a different country each month. Explore the world. Watch every film an actor has ever starred in. Watch every film to win Best Picture. If I learned anything, it's that there are truly too many movies out there to watch. I didn't even scratch the surface with monkey films. There's a lot more out there. So stop watching this video and go watch something weird and long and fulfilling. Something that is worth your time. Don't watch anything in the last 20 minutes of this video because it's not worth your time. But before you do that, thanks for watching. Go watch Cure by Kiyoshi Kurosawa. Inform your own opinion. And before you do that, I want to thank this week's sponsor, Squarespace, the all-in-one website platform for entrepreneurs to stand out and succeed online. Squarespace recently introduced Design Intelligence, which combines 2 decades of industry-leading design expertise with cutting-edge AI technology to unlock your strongest creative potential. Design Intelligence empowers anyone to build a beautiful, more personalized website tailored to their unique needs, creating their own unique online presence. Squarespace also makes it incredibly easy to connect social and multimedia accounts to your website as icons, direct links, or embedded feeds. It can all happen in just a few clicks, which allows you to build visitor trust while updating content only where you need it, extending your brand's footprint. Oh, did I mention you can also sell content on Squarespace? Whether it's online courses, blogs, videos, or memberships, they make it super easy to sell your content on your website. Simply set the price and then choose whether to charge a one-time fee or subscription for access. Head to squarespace.com to start your free trial, and when you're ready to launch that beautiful website, go to squarespace.com/Karsten to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. Thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you in the jungle.